Estou já em contato com outro Mauro.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this amazing session, Amazon at a Crossroads. My name is Jennifer Morris. I'm the CEO of the Nature Conservancy, and I'm so thrilled to be with you all today to talk about one of the most important biomes on this planet, not only for the people living in and around the Amazon, but for all of us. The Amazon region, as we know, is a global public good, but yet we are losing it at an unprecedented rate. In 2021, we lost an area of the Amazon equal to half the size of the country of Switzerland. Truly, the Amazon is at a crossroads, and I have an absolutely amazing panel of guests here to talk about this very thing. Let me just lay out what we're going to be doing today. We're going to have an opening on science from Carlos Nobre, who, if you don't know Carlos, the eminent scientist on the Amazon. And then we're going to talk to our government representatives here. I'd like to first introduce Susana Muhamad. Thank you so much for being here, the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of the country of Colombia. Then we have Governor Barbalho from the state of Pará in the Amazon, a critically important state of the Amazon that is seeing massive deforestation, but we have a plan in place for the bioeconomy, which we're going to be discussing. Soon we'll be joined also by the Minister of Environment for Brazil, Marina Silva, who will be joining us very shortly, and I will ask when she comes in that we will maybe stop the program and have her speak because she will have to leave a little bit early. And last but not least, an incredible entrepreneur in the Amazon, really making things happen on the ground, Gallo. Then we will, after we have these presentations, we're going to open it up for dialogue from you. So I'll be taking questions from the floor. So as we start, please be thinking about your questions. We are live streaming. We want to have this to be an engaging, interactive session as possible. We'll also have translation. The governor will be speaking in Portuguese. So for those of you that don't speak Portuguese, please use your headsets. I see some of you are using them now. And you can certainly join, I think, in Portuguese and Spanish and English. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Carlos Nobre. So Carlos, as I mentioned in my introduction, you are truly a force of nature when it comes to science in the Amazon, and you have been raising the alarm about the tipping points of the Amazon for some time. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what the science is saying. Are we truly at a tipping point in the Amazon right now?
Good afternoon, buenas tardes, boa tarde to all. Yes, unfortunately, we have to say we are very, very close to this tipping point. I will just make a summary of the Science Panel for the Amazon. We put together Science Development Sustainable Net Solutions, put together 2019, a group of scientists, 240 authors, 2/3 from Amazonian countries, and we released a report at COP26 and another report at COP27. So just making a summary, yes, all southern Amazon, from the Atlantic to Bolivian Amazon, is very, very close at the edge of this tipping point. We are seeing the dry season 4 to 5 weeks longer. Part of the southern Amazon, the forest has become a carbon source. It's not removing carbon from the atmosphere. So it's very, very close. And this is because of synergistic combination of global warming inducing severe and more frequent droughts, 2005, 2010, 2015, 16, 2020, with land use change. The forest evolved over tens of millions of years, recycling water very efficiently, very short dry season, lower temperature, ideal conditions for the forest. The tropical forest, but particularly the Amazon, there is no fire. Lightning strikes, ignited fire, they don't propagate. The forest is so wet, they don't propagate. So we, unfortunately, due to our ways in the last 50 years, since the 1970s, with a new model for the Amazon, which is cutting down the forest, replacing by one species. Anyway, so that's why we are very close, and that's why a key recommendation of the Science Panel for the Amazon, a big challenge, and I'm sure the minister here, Governor and Marina Silva will address. how to get to zero deforestation, how to get to zero degradation. So we have first to do it immediately to save the Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that the minister, Marina Silva, has just arrived. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So maybe, Carlos, one other question. So what do you feel that the new incredible government under Lula and with the minister's leadership, which the minister I heard recently saying that we now have a nature-positive government in Brazil. What do you think should be one of the first actions that the government takes to save the Amazon and prevent this tipping point you mentioned?
Well, of course, as I said, all Amazonian countries, we have really to move very quickly to zero deforestation, zero degradation. In the last 10 years, degraded area were double the size of deforested areas. So this is a big challenge, but I'm pretty sure governments of many Amazonian countries, here we have Brazil, we have Colombia, certainly these governments will be, I hope, very effective. The science knows how to do it. When Marina Silva was Minister of Environment, 2003, 2008, that was the time when we revert that model of the Amazon, 83% reduction in deforestation in 2004, 2012. So we know how to do it, but of course governments have the responsibility to do it, particularly because in Brazilian Amazon, 95% of the deforestation is illegal. So we have to combat the illegality.
Great, thank you so much. Minister Silva, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today. So you, of course, are the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and you're also from the Amazon state of Acre. So you've dedicated your entire career to saving the Amazon for not only the people of Brazil, but people around the world. Could you share with us today what some of your first priorities will be as minister?
Good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being able to speak, albeit briefly, because I will have to run to catch my flight. But we have a panel of highly qualified experts with our minister from Colombia and our governor of the state of Pará, and scientist Carlos Nobre. Brazil has accrued good experience in controlling deforestation in the Amazon. That was started in 2003, as Carlos Nobre has mentioned before, during the then Lula administration, when I had the honor to be the environmental minister. And we achieved results which is known to many of you present here today. But as he said, we decreased deforestation by 83% during almost 10 years. We prevented 5 billion tons of CO2 to be emitted into the atmosphere. That has been the greatest CO2 reduction contribution made so far. And we were the first country to have CO2 goals. At that time, it was very difficult to do that because we had to eliminate all of these structures and create everything from scratch, and to create a real-time non-deforestation system. And now it's even harder because the Bolsonaro administration has sort of led to a blackout in Brazilian environmental policies, and he has dismantled the inspection agencies, those of monitoring and management. He chopped off budgets, he removed scientific and technical teams, and empowered the groups against environmental agencies, agendas, especially those of the indigenous peoples and environmental matters. But we will have to face this. We have taken measures from the very first day of the Lula administration. We have the plan for controlling deforestation. We have revoked the measure that simulated illegal mining. We have replenished the Amazon Fund, or we're working towards that. And we are working for an interministerial group of 17 ministries to work together. It will be the Ministry of Justice, Environment, Defense, and land development. We understand that the protection of the Amazon is our duty, and we want to lead by example. However, we know that in order for it to be protected, we need to have a strong partnership with our neighboring brother countries like Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, Venezuela, all of the Amazonian countries, and we want to protect forests and biodiversity. This is a big initiative. President Lula is going to travel soon to meet the presidents of Amazonian countries, and from then on, we want to draw out a common strategy. We're going to invest in two sort of axes or rails, fighting illegal land use, and we are going to have 57 million hectares of forests of Indian land which is not being destroyed. That is going to be a major action. And in order for all of this to work out, we cannot just have command and control actions. We have to have the sustainable development pathway or rail. So this is important why this is why it is important to have partnerships with our partners and with the civil society and with the governors of states. When we first worked out the plan, we did not have good partners in Amazonian states back then, and now we do have some, and not all governors, but quite a few of them, and we have people from the area that are making their efforts. This will result in a positive synergy. I apologize for not being able to stay here longer to listen to you, but I'd just like to say that Brazil is back to the leadership of the multilateral environmentalism. We commit to zero deforestation and making all of its contribution for fighting the climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and to join the efforts of a new development model for the transition towards a sustainable model, both from the environmental, economic, and social point of view. The Lula administration is based on this tripod: strengthening democracy, fighting inequality, and a new cycle of prosperity that respects diversity, especially those of our First Nations. Thank you very much indeed, and I hope you have a profitable meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Silva, and we are thrilled to hear that Brazil is back. I think you know that everyone in this room, as you leave to go back home to Brazil, we are with you. And please call on us all to support your very important efforts. Thank you so much for your leadership. Now I'd like to turn it to Minister Muhamad, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of the country of Colombia, another critically important country in the Amazon biome. So President Petro has been rallying for what he calls a grand pact to save the Amazon, not only for biodiversity and carbon, but also for humanity. And he recently discussed this with Lula just 1 week ago. So can you tell us a little bit more about what the main proposals and vision are for this?
Yes, the question we have to answer collectively as Amazon countries, and very well said by the title of this panel, is actually how do we save the Amazon? This is the question at the center, and this is the political purpose we are putting together. It is with great relief that now we have political leadership in the region that is committed to climate change and that understands that our main commitment is to save the Amazon in order to stop the releasing of the millions of tons of CO2 that can be released to the atmosphere, throwing away the goal of 1.5 Celsius if we don't stop the degradation, but at the same time, because we know that could be our future prosperity for our countries. What are the concrete plan? What is the concrete plan? The first thing is with the panel of scientists and the research centers of the 9 countries, including France, who has the French Guiana, we are going to set a scientific meeting to answer from the scientific perspective this question based on the facts and what's happening on the ground. The second key actor are the indigenous people of the Amazon. The ecosystem of the Amazon, some scientists say, is a socio-environmental ecosystem. The practices of the people, the multiple diversity of the people. Just in the Colombian Amazon, we have 64 languages of the indigenous people, and many of these people are disappearing in their traditions and in their languages, disappearing with that the traditional and ancestral knowledge of how the Amazon works as an ecosystem. It's a system that has been also developed by the cultures and people that are there, and they have to have a political voice and a political seat at the table. Without that ancestral knowledge, we won't have the complete answer of how to save the Amazon for humanity. And the third part is the entrepreneurs, the technology, the bioeconomy that we could develop, but it has to be a bioeconomy that cannot see the Amazon only as a carbon sink. The Amazon is much more complex, is much rich, and we have to capture that diversity, and that diversity should be respected and should have a governance. So based on those inputs, we are going to set a plan, strategic plan of the 9 nations. We need also a governance. We have a treaty, the Organization for the Cooperation Treaty for the Amazon, that was established since 1978 or 74. And right now, that governance has been politically diminished. We need to recover that governance, modernize that governance, and put public institutions in front of this process. And has to have regional, by regional we mean multinational from the 9 countries, programs that have a social pact with indigenous people, has a political pact between the nations, and have public institutions, long-term institutions. This cannot continue to be fragmented projects, economic processes. Includes also the governors in all our countries who are dealing with the local realities. And these institutions have many tasks to do. Carlos was telling me about this initiative of the Technological Institute of the Amazon for the bioeconomy. It has to do the monitoring system of the environmental variables and continuous research of what's happening. It has to have the dialogue with the bioeconomy, but it also has to create the security environmental policy. One of the key drivers of destruction is multinational crime. It has to do with illegal mining, it has to do with illegal logging, it has to do with narco-traffic corridors, and we don't have a common strategy, so the people that are doing illegal gold mining in Brazil pass the frontier to Colombia, they continue destroying there, then when the police is coming, they go back to the other side of the frontier, and we don't have a common strategy. So these are some of the pillars that we need to build, and we expect to have the 3rd summit of presidents of the Amazon in history since we have the organization of the Amazon Treaty by May this year. So that based on all of this knowledge, we can establish this plan and then call the world to help protect the Amazon with our human capabilities, because probably is the 3rd critical pillar for resolving or at least trying to mitigate the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Minister. I just want to mention one thing. We had a representative from COICA, which is the coordinator of the indigenous communities of the Amazon River Basin. You mentioned they need a seat at the table. They had confirmed to be on this panel today. They, unfortunately, at the last minute, were not able to join us. So I just want to make clear that we want to make sure always that indigenous people have a seat at the table and a voice. So thank you so much for mentioning that. Governor, I'd like to turn to you now. So you have just recently been reelected and are doing a phenomenal job of addressing the deforestation in the state of Pará. Again, as I said, is one of the epicenters of deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. You have a plan, bioeconomy. Can you tell us more about it?
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for the opportunity of being here once again at the World Economic Forum. First, let me tell you a little bit about my state, the state of Pará. The state of Pará is the second largest state in terms of its surface, with 1,460,000 square kilometers. It has as part of its economy, the biggest province for iron ore production in Brazil, one of the biggest mining poles in the country. We also have, as part of our vocation, agriculture, livestock, which are some of the major economic sectors for our state. We have the second biggest cattle in Brazil, with 25 million heads of cattle in the state of Pará. And we also have a new production of seeds, grains, and also cocoa, one of the biggest productions of cocoa in our country, acai, berries, and also other palm fruits that are very important for our state. And this means that land use for our state is our biggest challenge, our biggest dilemma, and it's also at the core of our strategic decisions. Pará has 65% of its state as primary preservation zones. In 2002, when the Brazilian Institute for Spatial Research started to control this, we were able to see how much was emitted in the state. In the last assessment of 2022, Pará represented 34% of all greenhouse gas emissions for Brazil. Over the past 3 years, we have been able to slow down these emissions. I'd like to highlight the year of 2021 compared to 2020. We had a reduction of 21%, which means preserving 1,000 square kilometers and about the reduction of 6,000 tons of CO2 as a result of all the actions, command and control actions, surveillance and monitoring actions as well. But of course, we are aware that it is essential, first of all, agreeing with what was said by Minister Marina, Brazil and all the other nations have to join forces to fight against any illegal environmental crime. Without the act of the state, without a proper command and control action, we will not be able to reduce deforestation. We are aware that the only way for us to do that command and control, and if we only do that and surveillance, we will not meet our objectives. So that's the challenge that we are facing. We have to understand that there needs to be a change in terms of land use, in terms of the culture that has been the vocation of our state. And I'd like you to remember that the Brazilian Amazon has 29.6 million inhabitants. In the state of Pará alone, we have 9 million people. So it's really the biggest population of the Amazon. It's in our state. So starting in 2019, we built a legal framework to have a specific policy for climate change, and we passed this in Congress. And also we have a state program for the Amazon that makes a diagnosis about different possibilities in terms of land use. And this all led to the creation a year ago of the law and the state plan for bioeconomy. So we have set a deadline with these 12 months of being able to consolidate based on everything we've heard from science, listening also to traditional peoples, universities, the private sector. We established a group of more than 40 actors to be able to draft this state plan. And this plan, we have just launched it at the last COP in Egypt, COP27. This is the first public plan for bioeconomy. It's the only Brazilian state that has such a strategy for bioeconomy. And the idea is to really consolidate our new vocation, our state's vocation. For this plan, we want to highlight that it is also a result of all the debates we have had, the dialogue we have established with people who have traditional knowledge about the forest, as well as many actors, directly or indirectly, who have managed to help us in drafting this program. So it has three central pillars. First, about research, innovation, and development. The second focused on talking about our genetic and cultural heritage, and the third about sustainable development and businesses. I'd like to highlight that this plan, based on studies by the IDB, has been able to establish that in the state of Pará alone, which has the biggest biodiversity of the planet, based on that, we would be able to have 30 billion in business per year, so with 43 different products involved, whether coming from fauna or flora or all the biodiversity that we find in our region. And up until 2040, we might be able to account for a volume in terms of business that will allow the state to change its vocation, its economic vocation, to make sure that we are having a focus on sustainability actions, but also looking at the social aspects to make sure that this model is inclusive. So based on that, I'd like to highlight some of the areas that are very important for us in order to be able to consolidate all these activities. First, we'd like to create an observatory for bioeconomy to be able to assess the different data that come from all the existing value chains. Also startups for bioeconomy. We want to increase the amount of training that we have in bioeconomy so that we can have information inside our geographic zone about what's available in the Amazon, what we can do. And also, I'd like to talk about something very specific, the biopark of the Amazon. We have an intention, actually, with the discussions that I've had with the consortium and with Carlos Nobre, the idea is to have in the Amazon a biopark that gathers all this information, the knowledge, the technology. So establishing a biopark in the state of Pará, which will be a technological hub with all that this means in terms of possibilities, also advance in terms of research, strengthen our priorities, and also to continue establishing partnership with traditional peoples, ensuring that there is good trackability of the products that come from our regions, whether we're talking about protein, animal protein, or plant-based protein, so we can have some kind of certification label that will add value to the goods themselves and that will make these products more attractive. Generating microcredit to foster these activities through the Brazilian bank, the state of Pará bank, Pará. We have created a credit line, 400 million, about $90 million. So of our own resources that will be available, we have created a fund for the Amazon. This is a public fund that will be managed by society collectively to try and attract different companies that might be interested in joining us. So this is the plan that we have established for the state of Pará, based on the principle that we know the leadership that we need to have in order to deal with climate difficulties and in order to make sure that Brazil meets its targets and its commitments. But of course, we understand that we need joint efforts. We need to call everyone to action so that the state of Pará can be helped. We know exactly which pathways we need to take, but we want to make sure that this economic transformation and bioeconomy will happen in our states so that we can have sustainable development as well as social development in the Amazon region.
For those of you that are not Brazilian or know how large the state of Pará is, it's the size of Germany, France, and the UK combined. It's actually bigger than those three countries. If it was a country, it'd be one of the 25 largest in the world. So the efforts that you are doing are truly phenomenal. Thank you so much. But to succeed, the bioeconomy is going to need entrepreneurs. So last but not least, I'd like to turn quickly, because we are running, of quite short of time, to Derek Gallo. You have an amazing experience of developing entrepreneurships, doing businesses in the Amazon. Tell us more about what you've done.
Great. Firstly, I'd like to be thankful for the opportunity to uplink to the World Economic Forum, my co-founder, for creating this magical mountain experience where all this incredible stuff happens. So first, I'd like to share a little bit of the vision. Actually, we're working on Marajó Island, which is actually about the size of Switzerland. If you take out the lakes of Switzerland, actually Marajó Island is larger than Switzerland. So just one little piece is Switzerland. And our vision was we call it a food for good tech. So it's essentially a food tech plus a social enterprise. And we go beyond that also with incorporating various green technologies, various social technologies, blended finance. So it's really, sometimes that can actually be complicated for venture capital investors. Like, well, what's your product? And we're an ecosystem. So that's this food tech movement, and we talk about regenerative nutrition. We look at that as generating positive impact for the consumer of the products, for the river people, and then also for the rainforest. So if we could do all these things at once, then that's really what's super important for the world, because obviously, the tipping point we know about. We know that the struggles of the Amazonian people, the river people, the indigenous people, but also we have a health problem. We have about 20 million people who are dying of heart disease. We have obesity and overweight at huge 60-70%. We have diabetes. So the idea is a food product that as I say cure 3 birds with 1 healing stone. So it's these 3 things. So that's with the bioeconomy. It's with all these social, working with these locals to help them generate income. And then lastly, we have these, we launched these plant-based superfood ice creams that have no sugar added. They're rich they have 10 vitamins and minerals, so they actually strengthen the immune system. They have fiber. So that's kind of the idea of a product that can help, you can consume it, and that's where we have this idea of, let's say, food as a regenerative service to people on the planet. What if the act of eating, instead of actually having a negative impact, what if that could be a positive impact, and we could get everybody in the world to eat ice cream or other products to generate positive impact? So that's kind of the big picture. So for an investor, like, well, what's the innovation? Well, look, I mean, this could be, this could be very big. So just sharing a couple of experiences, many challenges, and I thought I could save the Amazon. It turned out to be much more difficult, and had to kind of regroup and figure things out again. There's so many opportunities. All of these palms. There's so many different palms. We have biofeed as well. We can actually use the cakes from the oils that we use for other uses, and aquatic plants as well. They have like 40% protein. We can raise that. So there's all these opportunities. So in conclusion, it's very optimistic, and I think if we join forces, I think we can really we can make a difference. So
great.
So thank you so much.
So much, Derek. You can see the enthusiasm, which is what we need in all successful entrepreneurs. So I'd like to turn it to the audience now to see if we have any questions for our esteemed panelists. Please wait 1 second for the microphone so we can have the translation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm David Victor, UC San Diego, Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I'm curious what the panel thinks about the role of carbon credits in protecting the forest. The theory is beautiful. The practice has been a disaster. There's a big story out yesterday in The Guardian on the same thing. Is this a dead end, or does this have promise?
Who would like to comment? Carlos? Sure.
No, it's not a dead end at all. Recently, I'm a member of the board of Art Trees, Architectural Red Plus Transactions, and we approved the first. Guyana got the credits, $20 per ton, the whole country, because high forest low deforestation rates. So the ecosystem service, that was $750 million for Guyana. So I think, if there are good traceability systems, and we are, like state of Pará, reduced 21% deforestation in the last year, we are going really to have concrete steps towards making the removal of carbon or reduction of emissions by deforestation degradation really economic value. I'm very optimistic that carbon credits will be not, as all of us said, it's not the only one, but it will become very important really to preserve the forest, particularly to create these large-scale forest restoration projects that we need $20 billion carbon credits will be very useful.
Fantastic. Minister?
Yeah, for me, if it doesn't have a clear governance and strong regulation, it can actually be a disaster. And that's the responsibility of the state. We need to define clear rules of the game, and that it has to do, and especially because we have, for example, follow-up restoration processes with carbon credits done between two private actors in Colombia, and the long-term restoration results are not there. So it requires, and this is a key question for all of us, I mean, in the public sector, how do we create institutions that will assure us that in the long-term restoration process to have ecosystem services could be 20 years? How do we have the institutions to follow up consistently, the financial capacity to follow up consistently, and how does the state, based on the scientific knowledge, defines where the restoration needs to happen, but more importantly, how the money is not in the intermediaries, how it doesn't stay in, this cannot become a financial speculation process. I'm speaking from a little bit of a different perspective than the governor of Pará, and I just want to use it because the great Amazon basin is a very diverse situation in different places. Like the Colombian Amazon right now is one of the most conserved part of the Amazon, but is also one of the most endemic part of the Amazon. That's where the Andean Amazon connection happens, and that's where the hotspot of stronger biodiversity is. So when you speak from that perspective, I don't want to see private foreign investors coming to sign contracts with indigenous peoples without any regulation, making their lands at the end become a financial speculation process. This could not be the track in the name of climate change and carbon for the Amazon. So part of this governance, which I insist strongly, has to do with set clear rules of the game, have strong monitoring system, and have clarity of institutions that will help these investors that want to invest in the carbon, that the revenues will go to the communities, really to the communities, and that the long-term ecosystemic results are there. And this is, I think, is a new public structure and a more clear capacity of the state that we will need to develop between all of us in this Cooperation Amazon Treaty.
Absolutely. We need clear rules of the road by the state to make the market work effectively. Governor?
Eu gostaria de concordar.
I'd like to agree with the minister. First of all, carbon credits, of course, if we're looking at preservation of the forests, are a very important strategy. It goes hand in hand with bioeconomy and biodiversity, and I defend the idea that carbon storage and having the forest standing alive, that needs to become a new global commodity itself. And based on that, we need to build some kind of rationale for regulating the market so that we have clear rules about how we set prices on the carbon that is stored, clear rules for the private sector, but also for the public areas, for the country or for the subnational state. Brazil's context, Brazil's reality is one that is really just starting. So we haven't yet established very clear rules about this type of market, carbon credit markets. We have relationships that happen at very small scale between private actors, and relationships that concern us a lot because, yes, there is a lot of speculation of private actors connected to local communities, traditional communities. This generates a lot of conflict. So first, I think that it is urgent for the world, and I think this forum is the most appropriate place for this. The world needs to understand that it is necessary, due to all the climate emergencies, for all the big players, all the big companies to really understand that whether through ESG, whether through because of having economic interests, and financial returns. All the players need to participate in this institutional market to try and set prices and regulate it. And of course, the countries need to establish clear rules about the negotiating process, how it will happen, and who will profit from that. I think this market is the only real solution and not the romantic solution of really having as allies the local producers, because forests starts to have a value that can compete in some way with other types of productions, which a lot of the time make the price for the forest, when it is standing, it makes it represent only 10% of that same area if it's going through agriculture, if it's being cultivated. And if we continue to have this situation, we will always have to monitor, we will always have to have police forces. So if we value forest and how valuable it is because of all the carbon sink mechanisms, because of its activity as a carbon sink, if we're able to convince people of that and precify that, then we can convince people.
As you've heard from government right here, the opportunities are there to do high quality carbon that's verifiable. We got to be smart about it. We need to learn from the mistakes of the past, but it offers an incredible opportunity for local communities, and we can't just give it up because of the mistakes of the past. We have time for one very short more question, and then we're going to wrap up. It is Switzerland. We need to end on time.
Espen Barth from Norway. I very much agree with the reply and the qualification from the panel, and I took the floor because I facilitated the negotiations on Article 6, which only concluded in Glasgow, and then we did some further work in Sharm el-Sheikh. And Article 6 is the part of the Paris agreements that regulate carbon markets, and I strongly agree it has to be anchored in the national jurisdiction. It has to have a high integrity, and we're trying to develop rules for that now. So you need interaction between loyalty to the principles of Article 6 plus the national jurisdiction and oversight that was mentioned by Susana Muhamad. And if you have that, it's a very meaningful instrument. But for instance, in the LEAF coalition, and there will be members of that here, business and country commitments to LEAF, we have said this should not be a substitute for decarbonizing your own value chain. It's an added. So to join LEAF, you have to say we will do everything we can to do our own decarbonization of our own value chain. And what we can't do, we can do through carbon markets as well. So it's a good thing, but it's a good question also because there's been a lot of fake out there, and we have to fight that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So I want to end there first by thanking my panelists. Thank you so much for your contribution, and thanks to Minister Silva, who had to leave us. Really appreciate all your efforts here. And thank you all in the audience. As you've heard today, the Amazon is one of the most important places on the planet. It is under threat. It is at a tipping point, and it's up to all of us to help save it. So thank you all for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.